So January 2024 is come and gone, and with that I was able to check out 11 new releases. So now let's stop and rank them all. What's going on, everyone? I'm Movie Man Mikey, and it goes without saying that I love movies. So this channel is designed to embrace that love and, of course, my opinion. Which brings us to talking about the new releases of this year. Admittedly, this first month of the year at the movies has been pretty dry, but I'm still excited to share my thoughts on all the movies I saw, as well as hear whatever y'all thought of everything that came out this month. Before diving into it, a quick shout out to my letterbox, where I'm always posting reviews for movies as soon as I see them. Also up there is this video in list format, in addition to a bunch of my opinions on thousands of movies. Without further ado, let's rip the band-aid off with my number 11 spot, Mean Girls. As someone who'd say the original 2004 movie is one of the funniest comedies of all time, I really did not want to hate this. But amidst its redundant and reductive marketing that doesn't even really take advantage of the fact that it is a musical, I was not excited walking into this. And in the end, this is arguably the worst thing I could have imagined. Watered down for a modernized generation, I'm sure this did click for some people, but for me, it was almost insulting watching Tina Fey retread the exact same story elements. All of the delivery of the iconic lines just came off incredibly bland and spiteful, and all the new creative decisions here just come across as vapid with some cringy musical numbers and mediocre at best choreography. Whether Honor Society, The Nice Guys, or Betty Brant in Spider-Man, I've seen Angourie Rice show her talent as an actress in the past, but I don't know where any of that is here. The closest I came to laughing was from the sheer stupidity of Avantika's Karen character, but honestly, in retrospect, I could have just been trying to overcompensate for having a miserable experience. In an alternate universe where I'd never seen the original, maybe at most this movie would get like a 2 out of 5 instead of a 1 out of 5 for me. But as it stands, I think it's a very lame and unfunny product that is easily the worst movie I've seen this year, and I highly doubt anything else will be beating it. So that is why for me, Mean Girls is in the last place spot at number 11. Coming in at the number 10 spot is Miller's Girl, the newest erotic thriller starring high-caliber actors Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman. I'm not sure what kind of blackmail the filmmakers had on these two, but seeing them in a Lifetime-esque movie like this was just crazy to me. Right off the bat, the story is pretty uncomfortable as this high school teacher recommends his 18-year-old student models her creative writing assignment off of a pornographic author. But rather than exploring these power dynamics in any meaningful way, the movie is just full of odd personalities and disgusting behaviors that are ultimately just never rectified fully. If there was anything to praise here, it'd be Jenna Ortega's effort, but even then, her character is just really cringy. Her chemistry with Gideon Adlon is very cringy as well, and Martin Freeman just looks totally confused as to where he is the entire time in this movie. Calling it here first, this is going to be the kind of film that will go viral on TikTok in a few years. And my number 9 spot is going to be Founders Day, the newest holiday slasher hitting theaters in the similar vein to Eli Roth's Thanksgiving, with the production budget of It's a Wonderful Knife. And with the latter a couple months back, while I didn't think it was anything spectacular, it had an unforgettable bloodbath of an opening. When it comes to Founders Day though, the story seems unsure, committing to full-on campiness, as every character in the movie takes themselves way too seriously. This isn't helped by some rough performances across the board from pretty much everyone in the cast, and a medley of twists in the final act that only served to make the story more contrived. The score was also pretty annoyingly repetitive throughout. As for what I did enjoy, the killer's outfit with the barrister's wig, the black cloak, and the gavel with the knife, I thought that was cool, but all of that you can see in the trailer. You definitely don't need to sit down and watch this full 100-minute movie to get that. I can look past the limited budget if the story is compelling enough, but the one here isn't. So that's why Founders Day is at number 9. Coming in at my number 8 spot is Lift, the latest in a long line of Netflix original action movies that are just bland, forgettable, and uninspired. F. Gary Gray is behind the camera here, and while his last couple movies haven't been the greatest, credits like Friday and Straight Outta Compton show that he has talent as a director. Unfortunately, he's still continuing with this streak of mediocrity with this disposable heist flick that we've seen 1,000 times before. I suppose the draw here is Kevin Hart stepping out of his generally fast-talking character roles, but he is just not believable as this lead of a heist crew. Gugu McBather-Raw and Billy Magnuson are constantly trying to breathe life into the story, but it's always being suppressed by the film's own conviction that it's way smarter than it actually is. The rest of the supporting cast are pretty wasted, and the elevated stakes by the film's end is laughably unengaging. I have seen worse Netflix original films in the past, but this one isn't too far from the bottom of the barrel, so that is why it is in my number 8 spot. Number 7 on my list is Night Swim, Blumhouse's latest venture into haunted objects, this time a swimming pool.
What?
Just last year, Blumhouse made a dent in the first week of January Curse by releasing Megan, and it was actually a pretty decent movie. So it's almost poetic how they kind of reset it with this movie. While this isn't the worst horror movie ever, Night Swim is doing nothing new for the genre aside from embarrassing 2 highly credible actors. Carrie Condon is by far the strongest aspect here, but her chemistry with Wyatt Russell is almost so non-existent, I could have believed that they were brother and sister had it not been for a kiss or two. And it's sad to say, as I've also enjoyed him previously, but Wyatt Russell gives by far the worst performance I've seen of his career here. The kids are also really annoying and are constantly making the worst choices, but that's really a testament to how the script doesn't know how to extend a story about a haunted pool into a 90-minute feature. The story of Bryce McGuire getting to direct his first feature-length film after being recognized from a short film 10 years ago is pretty admirable, but the final product here just didn't do it for me, which is why it's at number 7. Number 6 on my list is going to be Good Grief, Dan Levy's directorial debut on Netflix. The story follows Levy as he overcomes the death of his late husband on Christmas. The intentions behind this film are well enough, as Levy seeks to explore the insecurities amongst everyone along with the importance of friendship. At a point, however, the repetitive script began to feel tiresome, and the surrounding acting chops weren't strong enough to elevate the film's emotional weight. Ruth Negga and Himesh Patel play his 2 friends in the film, supporting him along the way, and while their performances aren't terrible, I just wasn't a huge fan of their characters. Heading into the final 15-20 minutes especially felt like a chore to the end, which is why I placed it here, but at the very least, we've gotten to the point now where I wouldn't say these films are terrible. So that's something. Now heading into the top 5, number 5 on my list is I.S.S, the new space thriller from Gabriella Copperthwaite, sorry if I mispronounced that, whose previous efforts in the documentary Blackfish and 2017's Megan Levy I really enjoyed. The premise here is intriguing enough, a confined thriller aboard the International Space Station following a fallout of war between Americans and Russians. What ultimately transpires over the course of the film, though, feels like it never recognizes that full potential, as characters are constantly confused and scrambling on what to do. Understandably so. The impromptu choices these characters make over the film's course is fair enough given the insane circumstances, but it all builds up to a finale that feels more like a cartoony space battle as opposed to the grounded story we had been experiencing. The performances across the board aren't terrible, 2 worth noting including Pilu Azbashk, I hope I pronounced that right, and Maria Mashkova, and it doesn't waste too much time at 95 minutes. I just felt it could have been a much more tense thriller, which is why I put it at my number 5 spot. Number 4 for me is going to be Self-Reliance, another directorial debut from an actor, this time Jake Johnson, who I always liked in New Girl. Before even a trailer for this was released, I was sold by the premise of an everyday man playing a game of life and death for $1 million. Between the comedic elements and the direction the story ends up going in, I give credit to Johnson for not going down the predictable route. That being said, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel pretty underwhelmed by the end. Actors like Anna Kendrick and Christopher Lloyd show up in minor roles throughout and are pretty entertaining for what they have, but the lukewarm conclusion makes their characters feel more wasted and inconsequential than they should be. As previously stated, I'm a fan of Jake Johnson, but something about his character in this wasn't super funny to me. Shockingly though, for his first time behind the camera, he doesn't seem too out of place. Just like the last one we talked about, Self-Reliance doesn't overstay its welcome at a concise 90 minutes, but it almost stays too grounded in the end for this big idea to feel fully capitalized on, which is why I have it here at number 4. Number 3 on my list is going to be The End We Start From. This is the newest release I've checked out. In this film, we follow Jodie Comer's character as she is faced with the challenge of fleeing her flooded town right after giving birth to a newborn. This is one of those cases where, on a technical level, I'd probably say this is better than the next 2 films. The performances from everyone are dedicated, the cinematography does a great job bringing the surrounding atmosphere to life. As she's been a breakout star over the last few years, this newest performance from Jodie Comer once again reinforces the fact that she is an emotional powerhouse that is very difficult not to resonate with. What's preventing me from placing it at the top is the aggressively slow pacing, albeit deliberately so. The story is told in such a way where you're constantly jumping around meeting new characters, but it's never long enough to fully flesh out and cling on to any of these supporting roles. Benedict Cumberbatch and Catherine Waterston's roles are probably the best example of this, but I will say I did think Waterston's performance stuck out a little bit more to me. So yeah, not the easiest to articulate my critique for, but its placement in the number 3 spot really just boils down to the film's slow nature. Coming in at number 2 is The Beekeeper. David Ayer's latest ode to the mindless action films of the 90s that understands and embraces its goofiness. Jason Statham is surely believable as an unstoppable leading man, but I do think his character could have benefited from having a little more personality. Not sure if I would have loved Josh Hutcherson as the villain had I not grown up watching him, but I gotta admit I was pretty entertained by his performance. With the story revolving around scammers though, this movie doesn't entirely take advantage of that aspect, and instead opts to use that for a couple of cool action set pieces. The insanely high stakes by the time we enter the finale are extremely messy and convoluted, and there are a couple characters in the supporting roles that are very frustrating to follow. All that said, I still had a pretty fun time watching and wouldn't be opposed to checking out a sequel, so that is why it is my number 2 film of January 2024. But coming in at the number 1 spot is James Samuel's The Book of Clarence, which was an epic flop at the box office to much of my disappointment. While Night Swim was technically the first movie released this year, I got a chance to see The Book of Clarence earlier actually thanks to Screen Unseen, so that was a cool experience, thanks AMC. I had no clue what I'd be getting into before I sat down, and by the time it ended, I thought it was an entertaining enough watch. After recognizing the power of monetary gain through practicing faith, Lakeith Stanfield as the titular lead essentially assumes the role of Black Jesus. Personally, I thought it was a pretty entertaining story to follow, and Omar Sy and RJ Cyler in their supporting roles were also super entertaining. Without getting into spoilers, what kept me from really loving this was the direction it goes in the second half, which also felt tonally confused with everything else. James McAvoy first shows up around 90 minutes in, but given his limited screen time, I feel like any actor could have played that character. On top of that, there's also a red herring in the form of a cameo by the film's end, which does come off pretty cheap and half-baked. All things considered, I've only grown more fond of this movie thinking about it over time, and on a rewatch, I could definitely see my rating going up from a 2.5 to a 3. So that is why The Book of Clarence is my number 1 film of January 2024. So those are all the movies I saw this past month ranked worst to best. I know it's a pretty anticlimactic ending given the last film I rated was a 2.5 out of 5, but that's January for you. Once again, shout out to my letterbox. I'm always posting reviews for movies as soon as I see them, as well as a bunch of other film content. I'll leave a link for that in the description. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I've been Movie Man Mikey, and always remember, enjoy yourself.